on the phone, and then she didn't even like blink an eye, and I'm like, maybe I'm just an adult now, and it happens. Life happens, and not that that this profanity is okay, but it's just like that's where I lean more towards alternative words are okay, because I think situations pop up. I mean, that you need a way to express your an emotion in a word you can't find an adjective for. I guess I don't know how to describe that. So, did you grow up going to church?
Yeah, I grew up going to several different churches actually. Went to a Methodist church. Ended up going to a Lutheran church for a while. I went to a Lutheran church while I was going to a Catholic school, which is interesting because the Lutherans were the first to break away from the Catholic Church. So I
felt like a half rebel.
Yeah, it was entertaining, and then I went to a couple non-denominationals until I found New Point, where I really like where we're at. But we went to church, and it's always don't cuss, watch what you're saying.
Same.
Nuns are extremely. I remember some really good moments of seeing a nun very mad and not cussing. It was hilarious. I mean, I was a fifth grader. So, I mean, to me, it was hilarious at the time, but looking back when I was a jerk. But
like, what are those, the Queen's Guards, where people you do everything you can to get them to flinch, and it feels like one of those tempting situations. You're like, I'm going to do everything I can to try and get her to say a word she shouldn't say.
Oh, yeah, there was a couple of us in that class that we definitely pushed our luck. But yeah, we had... But pretty much, it does. I don't think in any religion it really doesn't. It doesn't change. You shouldn't. They're all about don't say this, don't say that. So, I mean, that was how I grew up anyway.
So, what makes profanity bad? What makes the words that our culture chooses to see as cuss words? What makes them bad?
My opinion, you already said it. You just said it, cultural. Mm-hmm. It's all about the culture, because certain words you say, me and you say back and forth, it's fine. But if you go to another country, you say a phrase or a word, or even there's some, like, pointing a finger in some countries is like an insult.
Yeah.
So I think it's really the culture is what depicts what profanity is.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly why my opinion on profanity is really it's about the intent, because it's not the word itself. Because we have all kinds of words that we use that people see as offensive, and no matter where you go in the country, or in the world, like you said, different cultures have different offensives, and so yeah, like a finger wouldn't be offensive here, but it would be there. It's all about the intent and what it's known for. So I'd say these words that we know of as bad are bad because at some point they became assimilated with a negative connotation. So have you seen CDs that say explicit language when we were kids? And so obviously I was never allowed to have those kind of albums, but
neither was I.
I
had Adam Sandler. They took Adam Sandler from me.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, he was explicit though. I mean, he was terrible.
Oh yeah.
So, but yeah.
My second book was titled Explicit Jesus, and I remember the conversation with my mom. I had to explain to her what I was trying to get at, because I think when the first thing that come to mind when she heard the word explicit was she's thinking of like a cussing Jesus, and it's more about just an unexpected Jesus, and
an unexpected co-host.
Yes. my 3-year-old has come down here to join us.
Yes, we both have kids, so like we said in the beginning, if you hear things in the background and stuff, we apologize in advance. So it is what it is, but yeah, I mean, I've seen the explicit the things. Even like going through like downloading podcasts. My boys like to listen to podcasts with me, and like we were talking the other day, I have one podcast I absolutely love listening to, but they are those guys are very explicit. So it's not something I want to listen to with the kids, and I feel kind of like we were having a discussion. Like I feel kind of like maybe I shouldn't listen to this, but their topics and their research is amazing. They do a really good job. So it's kind of like one of those things I have to really have to think about if I want to keep listening to, especially after doing this podcast.
Yeah,
doing the research we've done here today.
Because I think a lot of what comes out is a result of what goes in, and we're eating healthy. My wife and I, we've been doing that for several months now, and she's been beginning to lose a lot of weight. And we realize when they say that diet is 80% or your nutrition and 20% workout, they're not lying. Because we work out, but not as, we got 3 kids under 5. We don't get a chance to work out very often, or as long as we'd like to. So I mean, and she's lost a lot of weight, and it's all because of this, the nutrition side of it. And so that just shows you that the process of the intake, the better intake creates a better outtake as well. So it's the same thing for our language. If we want better language, and I guess we got to watch our intake. So what would be the the worst time to cuss? Like if you were growing up, or even now, like what would be the worst time to cuss?
Well, I got a moment that happened just a little 6 months ago almost. Evan, which is our pastor at Cambridge, he also officiated my wife and I's wedding, and I was nervous, and right in front of my pastor, I think I let it slip a little bit, and he didn't even. Evan, he's a great guy. He didn't even faze him. He just let it go. But to me, I was like, okay, now I'm all nervous, and now I'm all embarrassed because I just cussed in front of my pastor. But I mean, that's one of.
We're just people too.
Yeah, that's what he told me. That's what my best man told me too. He's like, he's just a guy. Don't worry about it. I'm like, oh no. But I mean, I've had some pretty bad situations. I mean, that was an embarrassing situation, a little bit for me. But I mean,
like I've had nightmares about preaching and cussing, and I don't know. There's a guy that I delivered to down in Wheeling, and one day I remember I was frustrated about FedEx, and I'd said a word, and he knew I was a preacher because we've had many conversations, and he said, he's like, I'm just curious. He's like, have you ever slipped and said a word in the sermon? And I said, no. I said, but I've dreamed it would happen. I said, I don't know if that'd be like, make me feel more real to the people, or if that would, get me kicked out of the church. I'm not sure what would happen, but
something my grandfather told me is that he had a hard time trusting anybody that wouldn't swear at all. Like if you had a person that just wouldn't swear, like he said for some reason to him it just made him like they weren't real, because he felt as though that everybody at some point in time in their life has swore, and if you don't, then he feels like he doesn't quite know if he can
like
trust
standoffish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to like, it's more like opening yourself up, I guess. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
I'd
say another worst time would be in front of your grandparents, like my very older grandparents. That I can already hear my grandma Effie what would come out of her mouth if I said something. She's gonna probably find something to smack me with, but. Multiple use words, are they worth using? So some, how we all use profanity in different ways, and some words we don't use with ill intent towards others, but we use them as adjectives and as verbs. We're not going to give specific examples, but I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. Are they worth using? So that's a thought to think about.
Yeah, I mean that goes with the intent. I mean, to some people, if you're trying to describe something, and it just like you're trying to find the word that best puts forth your emotional, like what your emotional response is. Sometimes to them, that explicit word there meets that requirement. Some people say, well, you're just uneducated because there's better words out there, which could also be very true in that intent, but it's intent. If I'm just describing something, but I'm in no means being malicious to somebody, then is it all that bad?
Yeah, that's my initial opinion, and I'll show you here towards the end. Here, I'll show you some of the scriptures that I found that was my original opinion, and then after reading the scriptures, I thought maybe I should rethink this. But what's one of your most embarrassing cuss word stories? I've got a couple of them.
Probably the one with the. I think we were getting married, and I think one time when I was younger, I was in court. Oh,
jeez.
Yeah, I think
throw the book at you.
I let it slip, and he said, "What did you say?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, Your Honor." I remember that. He was. I can't remember the name of the judge, but I was so embarrassed. It was I was 16. I had it was my first car accident. It was just like a whole bunch of firsts. Now I'm going in front of a judge that I've never been in any kind of trouble, never went to a judge before. So I'm sitting there, and I think we were talking about something, and I can't remember what the situation for sure, but I know I let something. I think I let it slip, and it wasn't even a bad one, but he got on my case about it.
I'm surprised. When I was 16, there was once after basketball practice that I was going down 22 heading back towards our house, and a statey caught me at 67 and a 55, and I was 16, and I had to go to court and everything for it, and that was a scary day for me. It was the first time I've ever been pulled over. Just got my license, I didn't even have it probably, I don't even know, 2 months at that point, and it wouldn't have even been a month because it was during basketball season. I didn't get my license till November. But anyway, so we go to court, and I'm surprised I didn't let one out when he told me my license was suspended for 6 months. And I was just like, in my head, I was probably saying words, but I didn't say it out loud. But one of my most embarrassing stories, once I used to preach at 2 churches in Amish country in Millersburg, and they had a stage on, like where you stood up when you were preaching, and there was one sermon I was kind of getting dizzy, and I went to step down off the stage, and I began to fall, and as I was falling, I said, "Oh, shh," and then I caught myself, but everybody looked at me. I'm like, I think everybody knew what I was about to say, and so that was a close one. And then, but one of the funnier ones is recently on our way to church, my wife said, what did she say? Oh, she said, "What does beep mean?" And our 3-year-old daughter repeated, "What does beep mean?" Clear as day. And oh my gosh, we couldn't. She had no idea what she was saying, and we felt like terrible parents, but we laughed for a while. And then I guess probably like the first time in front of her parents, I mentioned that story with talking to Mom. I can't remember the first time I ever cussed in front of Dad, but so why do we use profanity? Why do we use these cuss words?
I think it depends on the part of society we're in. If you get a little bit, if you break down our society, you have different levels of society, and at certain levels, it's just part of common language. It's just, you say it all the time, and then if you move to another part of our society, it's not so much. So it's like you have where it's just common use. It's just part of the language. You have other places where people use it as a form of being malicious, being rude, being mean to people. They say it. It just kind of depends.
Do you think we use these words because they have a sense of like power, as in like